Blender Maniacs? What's going on? Alex Cortobard here. Once again, BlenderMania3D.com. Welcome. In this tutorial, we're going to take a look at modeling. And what do I mean by modeling? No, I don't mean fashion modeling or runway modeling. I mean modeling in 3D, which is basically making a 3D representation of any object within your 3D scene by what's called extruding and manipulating your object and the vertices, faces, and edges. So if that sounded like a mouthful, hold on, we're going to get right into it, and it's going to be very simple and really fun, because now you're really going to see how you can pretty much make anything within the 3D world. So let's jump right into it. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to delete our default cube, as we do not need it. We're going to be making that scene that you saw in the thumbnails of the videos. So first off, let's delete this default cube by first selecting it if it's not selected with the right mouse button. Man, I'm forgetting my simple actions. Right mouse button, select it, X, and delete the default cube. Now, to add an object, go ahead and hit Shift A, and you can see that it brings up a menu of a bunch of different things that we could add to our scene, such as a lamp, a camera, speakers, etc., etc. For now, we're just going to go to the mesh section, and right here you can see a bunch of different meshes here, from plane, cube, icosphere, cylinder, torus, even a monkey head. And these are basically the base meshes, or the base objects, which you then model or manipulate to transform into certain objects. Believe it or not, even something such as a human being or a dog or a boat or a car, these all start from a simple object such as a plane or a cube. So obviously the shape we had before was a cube. Right now we're going to add a plane. So go ahead and go to mesh and click on plane, and you can see that adds a plane in there. Cool. So now let's scale it up. As we saw before, that is with the S key. Go ahead and scale it up to about so. And now what we're going to do is we're going to start modeling some things. However, with the ground floor, we're going to add some thickness to it actually. So what we're going to do, and again, I'm stuttering on my words. I'm too excited, guys. All right. We're going to add some thickness to this. So as I explained before in the last video, we were in object mode, and this manipulates the whole object. If we go down here and go to edit mode, you can see that our object changes a little bit. And the shortcut key for object and edit mode is the tab key. So you could just hit tab. Now in edit mode, you could see that we have a little bit of a difference. First off, you can see that by right clicking these four corners, we have 4 points, or what are called vertices. So meshes comprise of 3 different elements. They comprise of vertices. And then if we go down here, we could change it from vertices to edges, as you can see right here, and faces, which is basically this whole face right here. Now, the minimum amount of vertices that you need to form a face is 3 vertices, such as for a triangle. A vertice or a vertex, which is a single vertex, can stand alone by itself, and an edge, obviously, you would need 2 vertices to be able to form an edge. Now, once again, just like with selecting an object, you could right-click to select these. Shift right-click allows for you to select multiple of them. And obviously, if you select all 4 of them, you've now selected the face. If you select 2 of them, you've now selected this edge. So there's many different ways, again, to go about things. You could select 2 vertices, and then you have an edge, or you could just go to edge select mode and select the edge. Depending on what you're doing and how you like to work, you might decide to select it differently, but either way, that's how you do it. And the shortcut key for this, so that you don't have to go back down to the bottom every time, is Control Tab, and that brings up that little menu right here where you could select between vertex, edge, and face select mode. So if you right click a vertex, now you can see that if you hit the G key, you are now manipulating that vertex and that vertex only. And just like the tutorial before, left click will confirm it. So check that out. That's pretty cool. And then Control Z to undo it, just like before. However, with edit mode, you cannot hit Alt-G to clear the location, as that does not work in edit mode. So just hit Control-Z to undo whatever you want to do, or just bring it back. All right, cool. So now what we want to do, you can see that obviously right now we're very limited in what we can do because we only have 4 vertices, which kind of sucks because all we can do right now is have a plane or maybe a different style of a plane. So we could do some pretty cool stuff, but not really that much. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some depth to our floor because right now it's looking a little bit flat. Another thing to keep in mind that I should mention before we go any further, you can see this little orange point right here on any object. This is the center origin point of your object. If I hit tab to go back into object mode, you can see if I grab it and rotate it, it rotates and grabs around this center origin point. Now if I'm in object mode and do these manipulations, the origin point moves with it. However, if I hit tab to go into edit mode, the shortcut key A is to select or deselect all the vertices or all the edges or all the faces. So if I hit A to select everything and G to grab it, you can see that that center origin point stays where it's at. It actually does not move in edit mode. So if I left click this and go back to object mode, you can see that now if I rotate it, it rotates it from that center origin point and scales it from there as well. So I'm going to hit tab to go back into edit mode and hit Control-Z to undo that. So you want to keep that in mind. For the most part, you're not going to want to move your object away from the origin point unless you know what you're doing, which we'll take a look at in further tutorials. But for the most part, you're going to want to leave this center origin point as it is. So just keep that in mind when you're manipulating objects in edit mode. So now with everything selected, again with the A key, just go ahead and hit the E key. Now the E key allows for you to do what's called an extrusion. So it basically extrudes whatever is selected. So if we hit the E key, you can see that now it extrudes everything we've selected along the Z axis automatically. So bring this down a little bit and then left click to confirm, and that will extrude your plane so that it has some depth. Another example of the extrusion, basically if I go to face select mode, you can see that if I select this face right here and hit E to extrude once again, you can see that it extrudes along the Z normal axis. We'll get into normals a little bit later, but it basically extrudes it perpendicular to the vertical position, which would be the global Z axis right here. Again, we'll get more into that a little bit later, but as soon as you hit the E key, keep in mind that it extrudes it along this axis right here. If you don't want it to extrude it along that axis, just right click, the extrusion will still be there, and then you can hit the G key to grab it and move it any which way, and you could hit the Z key, X key, or the Y key. But again, you want to keep in mind when you're extruding, this right here is not good geometry because you could see that this extrusion is within the face of our original mesh. You could see this weird flickering, and that is not good. So you do not want meshes, vertices, faces, edges overlapping one another or on top of one another. So if we bring this out a little bit on the y-axis, that would be fine. But again, you do not want it overlapping as it was before. I'm going to hit Control-Z to undo all that. And then I'm going to also show you, if I hit Control-Tab and go into vertex select mode, you could see that I could also extrude vertices with the E key. And then hitting the Z key, I could bring it along the Z axis, extrude a vertice. Or if I go to edge select mode, select an edge, E to extrude it, I could extrude an edge. And once again, hit the Z key or X or Y key, depending on which axis I want to bring it up along that axis. Now, as we go further along with the extrusion tool, you're going to get more use with it. In the meantime, I'm going to keep it simple because there are some things that you could run into some problems, etc. For example, if I extrude this edge and then I hit E to extrude this edge, and you think that it's a solid wall, but you could see that right here, it's actually not connected here. So once again, we'll get more into that a little bit later as we go ahead on this tutorial. So besides that enormous sidetrack, let's get back to our floor here. So our floor is done. That's awesome. And once again, that is the extrude tool. It basically allows for you to extrude whatever is selected. Cool. Now that we got our floor over here, let's go ahead and let's make our little robot character. So let's hit Shift A, add a mesh. We're going to add a UV sphere right here. Cool. Now, another thing to keep in mind, whenever you add an object over here on the, you have to make sure that the tool shelf is open by hitting the T key. If it's not, you can see that you have segments, rings, and size right here, and a couple other options. But for the most part, you're going to take a look at segments and rings. This allows for you to set the amount of segments and the amount of rings. Oh, genius, Alex. Yes, I know. The segments and the amount of rings as the name implies. For now, we're just going to leave it at the default 32 and 16, but just keep that in mind. However, the more vertices, edges, and faces your object has, the more you have to play around with it, and also the smoother it is. For example, if you have a ball or a sphere with only 3 segments, it's not going to look like a ball at all. You know, you need at least maybe 8 for it to look like a ball. So again, the more vertices you have, the better. In a way, you want the most amount of vertices that gives you the look that you're going for, and no more than that. For example, I could probably the max you would bump this up to, depending on what you're doing, of course. Let's say 48. It's looking pretty smooth. Now 48 looks pretty good for a sphere or a ball. I would not put this to, let's say, 300, because even though that might make it a little bit smoother, it's completely impractical because there are way too many vertices for what I'm going for. A simpler example would be, for example, this cube right here. This cube, well, it's now a cube, but our floor has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 vertices. Now, it would not need any more than that for it to be a square looking floor. For example, I could hit W and use the option called subdivide, which basically subdivides and breaks your whatever you've selected into multiple subdivisions. So if I hit subdivide, you can see that it's subdivided even more. And if I hit this 3 or 4 times, you can see that I have a ton of more vertices. However, I do not need any of these for it to look like this, because in object mode, it looks exactly the same. So all of these right now, and you can see that now we have, if you look at the top right here, we have 386 vertices instead of 8. However, it's exactly the same shape. So I'm telling you this because it's especially critical, especially in animation. The more vertices you have, the longer it will take to animate your scene. So keep in mind, you want to have the least amount of vertices that gives you the look you want. I'm going to hit Control Z to undo all of that. Again, you can see with 8 vertices, it has the exact same look as with 300 plus or whatnot. So with the sphere, you can see that once you deselect it, this goes away. So I'm going to X, delete that, Shift A, add a mesh, UV sphere. I'm going to add that again and keep it at the default. Let's bring this above the plane right here. And now what we want to do is go ahead and click on smooth shading right now because it's looking a little bit blocky. So we're going to click on smooth. And then going into front view by hitting 1 on the keyboard on the numpad. Zoom in a little bit with the mouse wheel. Shift middle click to center it nicely. Go ahead and hit tab to go into edit mode. And here are different ways that you could select your selections or whatever you want to select in edit mode. So once again, we're in vertex select mode. To do that, just select vertex or control tab, vertex select mode. And again, this is a getting started tutorial, so I'm trying to run everything step by step from a very beginner's perspective, because I hate it when I watch tutorials or things and people are skipping over as if I know what the heck I'm supposed to do and I have no idea. So I'm keeping this with you in mind, the very new beginner. So if you know some of this stuff, skip on to other tutorials. You don't need this, but if you do need this and this is your very first start with 3D and Blender, then hopefully this is helping. So here are multiple ways to select things. You could shift right click and select multiple vertices or edges or faces. If I go to control tab face select mode, I can now select multiple faces by shift right clicking. I'm going to go back to vertex select mode, control tab, vertex select mode. Another way to select things is if you alt right click in between two vertices, such as this, you could see that you do what's called a edge select or a loop select. So you select the whole loop. You could do that like this as well. And you could, of course, shift alt right click, and select multiple loops that you want. Of course, if you select alt shift right click two vertex loops that are right next to each other, then it becomes a face select loop. So you could get the same exact result by hitting control tab, going to face select mode, and alt right clicking on a in between a face like so, and you could do a face select. And of course you could do the same thing with the edge select by alt right clicking, and this allows for you to select the whole loop. Alright, so once again we have shift right click to select individual and multiple, alt right click to select loops, and alt shift right click. Again, holding down shift just adds to the selection. So you could select loops and then multiples as you want. Alt right click selects the loops. And then one last one we're going to go over, or actually two more that we're going to go over here. Or actually maybe two or three. Control tab, I'm going to go to vertex select mode. And as I go along the tutorial, I will mention these every time I use them. Another way to select things, and once again, you could hit G and then you can move these things around, scale them up, rotate them, etc., just as you would before. Another way to select things is with the C key. If you hit C on your keyboard, it brings up a brush tool, and you can use a mouse scroll up and down to increase the radius, and then you can left click and drag whatever you want to select. So that's with the C on your keyboard. Man, I'm trying to I don't know what I was doing. Anyways, with the C on your keyboard, you bring up the brush tool. And then the last one is with the B. If you hit B, you get crosshairs, and then you can left click and drag, and you box select your selection. Cool. So once again, right click to select, shift right click to add selections, C to bring up the brush tool, and then B to box select selections. And you could do this on edge select mode, face select mode, whichever. So that allows for you to be able to grab whatever you want. Now, another thing to keep in mind, and this video might be in two parts because I feel like this one's going to be a little bit on the longer side because these are some critical things that you need to know about. So another thing to keep in mind is right now we are in solid mode. You can see that by right here, solid mode, which basically makes your mesh solid. There's a couple other modes right here, but the only other one we're going to look at in this tutorial for now is the wireframe mode. So if you go to wireframe, you could actually see through your mesh. Now the shortcut key for this is the Z key. Z key right there. And once again, if you are forgetting the shortcuts, etc., make sure to opt in on the home page or even on the tutorial pages. Put in your email and your name, I believe, and you could get a couple of things. But in there, there's a shortcut key blueprint or page or whatnot that will show you all the shortcut keys in case you forget. So just throwing that out there. So once again, with wireframe and solid mode, for example, if I hit C to get my brush tool and left click and drag here, you can see that I select this, but if I middle mouse click to rotate around, you can see that none of the faces in the back are selected because it's only selecting what's in front of me. However, if I hit A to deselect all of that, Z to go into wireframe, and then C to bring up the brush tool again and left click and drag, you could see that now if I hit Z to go back into solid mode, it's selected through the mesh. So basically it makes your mesh transparent so that you could select through it. And there's a dog bark for you. Alright, now that I got the dog barking out of the way, I don't know how I don't get more barks. I got 4 dogs in this house and... Alright, back to work. Back to Blender. So again, wireframe allows for you to select through the mesh. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to hit Z to go into wireframe. And also, remember what I told you in the first video about orthographic view? For example, if you want to select half of the sphere here, you could hit B to box select and do this. However, it's a little tricky because you have a 3D perspective on it. And you can see that right now I've selected this half, but then over here towards the back, it's selected the bottom half. Because if you look at it, it's kind of... it has a 3D feel to it. However, if I hit the 5 key on the numpad, again, it flattens everything like a 2-dimensional image, and you can see it's called orthographic view instead of perspective. And, alright, I had the dogs barking and then the sister talking, so now I got it under control. So, with the orthographic view, you can see that this comes in very handy to basically compress it and make it so that you only see a 2-dimensional perspective of it so that we could easily select exactly half of the sphere or whatever we want. So hitting the B key, we're going to box select all this, and this is just a little over half of the sphere. And then we're going to hit X, and again, X in edit mode allows for you to delete vertices, edges, faces, and then a couple other options, but we're just going to take a look at these 3 right now. So right here, we're going to want to delete the faces. So if we hit delete faces, there we go, you can see that it deletes the faces there. Now keep in mind, if you hit X and delete the vertices, you'll get a different result because these faces right here, they need these vertices to be faces. So if you remove these vertices, it will also remove these faces right here. Hopefully you get that. So here we're going to hit X and we're going to delete the faces. So it's going to delete all these faces that we have selected here. And there we go. Cool. Now I'm going to hit 5 to go back into perspective mode and Z to go back into wireframe. Alright, we're getting the start of our robot. What I'm going to do next is we are going to extrude again like we did with our plane. So Alt, right click this loop, and then E to extrude. And here, instead of left clicking or doing anything, we're just going to, with this selected like it is, right after you hit the E key, we're just going to right click and leave it as it is. Cool. So now with that, we're now going to scale it with the S key and scale it in. You know, maybe we can make a robot, or maybe we can make some chocolate or something. No, we'll stick with the robot. So S, let's scale that in, and then just bring it down a little bit by left clicking and dragging on the blue arrow. Coolio. All right, now what we're going to do is we want the head of the robot. So for the head of the robot, we're just going to copy this sphere in object mode because we want it to be 2 separate objects. So hitting 1 to go into front view with the object selected, again in object mode, we're going to hit Shift D, copy it, and then Z to bring it up. And once again, Shift D allows for you to copy your objects. You could do that in edit mode or object mode. However, when you do it in edit mode, it will still be a part of the same object. So here in object mode, we now have two different objects. We're going to select it, and in front view still, which is numpad 1, going to hit R to rotate 180 to rotate 180 degrees, and then bring it down, and then hit S to scale it in a little bit, or to scale it down a bit, and then S and Z to scale it on the Z axis, and then bring it down a bit. Now this robot might look slightly different than the one that you see in the video or the image or whatnot, as I don't, I'm not going exact step by step by exactly how I made it, because honestly I don't remember exactly. Obviously I could, but it doesn't matter. It's still gonna look cool, and it's gonna look pretty much the same. But don't cry if it looks like 1 millimeter off. The beauty about 3D is making it your own. You're following this tutorial, but if you want to make your robot look like a triangle, then go for it. Go for it. Be individual. Be yourself. This is 3D arts. That's why it's beautiful. You can express yourself how you want. So make it a triangle, make it a cone, make it an ice cream robot. I don't care. Make it how you want. You could even change this a little bit if you want. All right, cool. So now we got the head and the body. There we go for our robot for the most part. Let's hit Shift right click to select both of these and bring it up a little bit so that he's not in the floor. Now we're just going to add the eyes to him. So 1 to go into front view, right click the head, and then tab to go into edit mode. For the eyes, we're going to hit Control Tab, go into face select mode, and we are going to Shift right click these 4 and Shift right click these 4 right here, and then hitting E to extrude, and then Y to extrude it on the Y axis. We're going to bring these in a bit. Or actually, before we do that, and see, this is cool because we could just go back a little bit, right click to undo that, and then Control Z to undo that as well. And what we're actually going to do is we are going to round this off a little bit first. So Control Tab, go into vertex select mode. I got the dog barking in the background. Hopefully you can't hear it. And then select this vertex. And what we want to do is round this off a little bit to make it more spherical looking, because your robot can have square eyes. Again, I said be individual. If you want your robot to have square eyes, go for it. I'm not going to judge. It's cool. I'm going to make circular eyes because that's what I want. So we could grab this to kind of round it off, but the only problem is we don't know if we're going into the head. See right there, it's going into the head. All we want to do is kind of slide it up so that it makes more of a spherical or a circular look to it. So the way we're going to do that is if you hit G, it could grab it and you could bring it everywhere. But if you hit G and then G once again, you can then what's called edge slide. Now this is awesome because here you could slide an edge along the surface of your object so it doesn't lose its actual shape. You can see here it loses its shape completely if we try to move this around. But if we hit G twice, you're then given this yellow line, and you see this yellow line is whatever edge that it's going to slide around. So I'm going to go in front view, and then I'm going to hit G twice and then edge slide this up right here. I'm going to go see if I could get that dog to be quiet for a second. Man, that dog is crazy. All right, back to the tutorial. So let's go ahead and edge slide all 4 of these on each corner or each edge. So again, hitting G twice with these vertices, we're just going to edge slide them out and like you see, make this a little more spherical or circular. We're also going to do that with this one over here and edge slide these. Now again, keep in mind that this might seem like a lot, and it is. Trust me, remembering all these shortcut keys, G, S, K, L, M, N, O, P, Z, You know, but as you go into it, within a couple of tutorials and videos and using it a little bit, you're gonna know it like the back of your hand, and you're not even gonna think about it. You're not even gonna give it a second thought. So you can see that by hitting G twice, we've now made this a little bit more spherical or circular for the eyes. Now hitting Control Tab, let's go back into face select mode. I am going to hit C to get our brush hairs out and just left click on that to select it, and then E to extrude, and now hit the Y key and extrude it along the Y axis and bring it in. However deep and sunken you want his eyes to be is up to you. Cool, so there's his eyes, and you might say, Alex, it looks a little bit blocky. Maybe we should have added more vertices. Aha! Yes, but no. There is a much smarter way than adding more vertices. Once again, one way to make it smoother is flat and smooth shading. So obviously we already have smooth shading. So you're thinking, what the heck is going on? This thing looks blocky. So instead of adding more vertices, again, you want the least amount of vertices. And if you need to smooth something out, we're going to take a look at one modifier as well in this video. So if we go over here to the properties tab and go to the little wrench icon, these are the modifiers. If you click on add modifier, you have a bunch of different ones. And as we go along, we'll probably learn all of them. But for now, we're just going to use probably the most used modifier in Blender, probably in 3D as we know it, is the subdivision surface modifier, or subsurf modifier, which is right there, subdivision surface. So if we go ahead and select this, you can see that right away it smooths our mesh. And the way it does this, if we hit the Z key to go into wireframe, if I hit the eye icon to make it visible or not visible, you can see that it basically subdivides our mesh. So what it does is, if I hit tab to go into edit mode, A to select everything, and W subdivide like I had done before in the plane, basically subdivides it and adds more geometry and smooths it at the same time. So it basically does that and then smooth to smooth it out. However, doing it this way, as you see here, is not smart because now you have way too many vertices. And let's say you wanted to change the eyes and how they looked. Now you would have to probably move like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 100, whatever vertices just to get the eye shape to look different. So the beauty about the modifier is it does this in the background without actually applying it to the mesh. So if I hit Control Z to undo that, you can see that if I click that little eye icon, basically has the same result, but check this out. Now this is awesome. We have the same amount of vertices that we originally had. So now it's still the same amount of vertices, but it looks a whole lot smoother. And we could even bump this up to levels 2, and it will be even smoother. However, we're not going to do that because we don't need it. And again, if you go into wireframe mode, you can see what that does. Again, keep in mind, the more vertices you have, the slower it will be to render. And this includes subdivision surface. So if you have this to, like, let's say level 4, which is completely unnecessary, yeah. For the most part, subdivision surface, the max levels you want to have it at is levels 2, sometimes levels 3. But levels 2, max 95% of the time. If you're not getting a smooth result with levels 2, then you're doing something wrong. And, well, maybe not wrong, but there's you could do it a different way. Because, again, you don't want to add levels 3 because that will add unnecessary geometry. So you might also be wondering, why do the eyes look so strange? Well, the way subdivision surface works is that it basically subdivides and smooths. For example, let me click these here. It smooths it from one edge to the next. So right now it's smoothing it from here to in here. So basically it's smoothing from here to in there. And it's basically, as you can see right here, it's subdividing between here and here. If we want it to be sharper, for example, a sharper edge, all we need to do is hit tab to go into edit mode. Control R, and this is another way to add geometry. So far we've looked at extruding with the E key. We've extruded the eyes in and we've extruded our plane. Control R allows for you to add what's called a loop cut. So just like Alt right click allows for you to select a loop cut, Control R, you could add in a loop cut anywhere on your mesh. And you can see dictated by the purple line. So if I hit Control R and get the purple line within the eye, I could left click, and right after left clicking, you're able to move your mouse around to position it. So what you want to do is you want to position it all the way in front, but not completely in front, because again, you don't want vertices overlapping one another. Oh, there's a dog bark. You don't want vertices overlapping one another. So what you want to do is bring it all the way to the front and then bring it back just a tiny bit to where it's behind the other vertices. So now you can see that it's a lot smoother, it's a lot crisper and sharper. The reason being is that now it's subdividing and smoothing from here to here and subdividing that instead of having to subdivide from here all the way to over there, which has less subdivisions. So we're going to do the same thing for the back of the eye. We're going to hit Control R, add a loop cut here, and then bring it all the way to the back and then forward a little bit to where you can see it start to change right there, so that it's not on top of these vertices right here, so that you have some space between the two vertices right there. So now you can see that compared to the other eye, it looks a lot better because again, it's a sharper, crisper smoothing and subdivision. So whenever you use the subdivision surface, a lot of times you're going to be adding loop cuts around a lot of the areas to make it sharper and crisper. Let's do that to the other eye, because here it looks like he's got a black eye or he got punched in the face. So unless you want that look, let's go ahead and hit Tab to go into edit mode. Control R, left click, bring it all the way up front and then back a little bit. And again, these could be literally like 1 millimeter apart. But again, you don't want it right on top of each other because that could create some weird glitches. Control R once again, left click, drag it, and bring it back a little bit. Cool, there we have it. And then another one we could add, because right here you can see that smoothing the bottom. So if we hit Control R, add one right here. Let me hide this. So one way to make it easier to model, if you select an object, and you could do this in edit mode as well, but if you select an object and hit the H key, that will hide an object. So if I select this, hit Tab to go into edit mode, you can see that right here it's kind of rounded because again it's subdividing it from here to here and then from here to here. As you can see right there, it gives it a nice smooth rounded edge. But if you want it sharper and cleaner, you would add a loop cut. And there we go. So once again, the closer the edge loops or vertices are to each other, the sharper the subdivision surface will be. For example, if you add a loop cut here, right next to that one, you will see that now you get kind of like an edge around there. It makes it sharper and yeah, it makes it sharper. It makes the subdivision sharper. And if you want some look like that, you definitely can as well. I'm going to hit Control Z to undo those two and just leave the bottom one. And then to unhide this bottom body, I was going to say this bottom thing, but it says body. Come on. Hit Alt H. That will unhide it. Let's go ahead and add a subdivision surface to this as well. We're going to select it, add modifier, subdivision surface. And we're going to leave this at 1. View is 1 and render is 2. That means in the viewport right here, it's going to be 1. But when it's rendered into an animation or an image, it's going to be 2. And rendering basically means putting the scene together into a final finished product. So, and again, with this one as well, we could leave it the view 1, and then the render will be 2. So when you render it out, it will actually be at level 2. With this bottom one, tab to go into edit mode. I'm also going to make it sharper at the top right here. Control R, left click, and then left slide it up and click it there. All right, cool. So now we got our little robot. Awesome. So last thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add, we're going to make the pathway or the walkway here. And to do that, I lied to you guys in this tutorial. I'm sorry. I said we were going to take a look at one modifier, but we're actually going to take a look at two. Selecting the walkway, we're going to go back to the add modifier. We're going to add a modifier, and what we're going to add is an array modifier. Now, this is probably the second most used modifier in Blender. Correct me if I'm wrong, but no, it's probably one of the top 5 at least. Array modifier basically duplicates your object, and again, in 3D arts, in Blender, in life, watch out, I'm getting a little philosophical here. It's about keeping it simple with getting the exact result that you want. So with the floor, we could obviously hit Shift D and copy the floor here. I'm going to undo that. We could even go into edit mode and hit Shift D and Y and copy the floor there. But then we have 2 different floors, and that's not very effective. So if you want to copy an object, the reason it's not effective, let me show you. If I hit Shift D and Y, copy this floor here. If I then make changes to this floor, you can see that the other floor is not affected at all. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. By the way, you don't have to do any of that. If I select this and add a modifier array, this basically copies your object. However, if I hit tab to go into edit mode, you can see I only have one object technically. And if I move one, it affects the other right away. So that's really cool. It allows for you to duplicate your object, but still keep it a single object. Kind of like Subsurf allows for you to subdivide and smooth your object, but yet still keep it, the minimum amount of vertices. This allows for you to duplicate your object, yet still keep it one object. Now here, you can see that we have the direction that's going. So right now it's going on the X axis. So this is X, Y, and Z. We're going to set this to 0 because we don't want it to go that way. We want it to go on the Y-axis. So we're going to set that to 1. And then now it's going on the Y-axis. If you put it to 1.1, you will see that you have a little gap in there as well. So you could definitely do that if you want, kind of like a walkway. And then the count right here is the amount that you have. I'm going to set this back to 1 so that's stuck to each other. And then some of the other options we'll take a look at in further tutorials during different things, but for now we're just going to keep it simple. And again, this is really awesome. I mean, check this out. Okay, enough of that. Back to the tutorial, but check it out. So again, it's about keeping it simple because simple is good. Cool, so now what we're going to do, we're almost done with the modeling portion of it. Let's go ahead and add in the big, man, I'm losing my words here. The big factory space thing that he comes out of. So hitting 7 to go into top view. I'm just going to, and wherever you position your 3D cursor by left clicking, that's where the object is going to be added. So I'm going to left click over here, hit Shift A, add mesh, cube, and then scale this way up with the S key. And then hit G, Z, bring this up. And then bring it back a little bit. So that's like right there. Now I'm going to hit SX, scale this along the X axis, and perfect. Now we need to add some kind of doorway to this because it's a little bit, it's a little bit solid wall. So to add a doorway, we're going to add some loop cuts to this and then delete them, delete the faces. So hit tab to go into edit mode. And once again, I know me when I first started, I watched tutorials and now I'm like, how did he do that? How did he extrude it? How did he subdivide? I don't remember, and I'd have to go back and look at it again like 100 times until I finally got like how to do that one simple thing. But trust me, just keep along, and within a couple tutorials, probably by the end of the series, you're gonna be good. You're gonna be good. So just keep it up. You're doing awesome, especially if you're this far. So for this, let's go ahead and add a couple loop cuts. We're going to hit Control R with the purple line. We're going to left click, bring it down to about right there. So that's right underneath the walkway. Control R, add another one, and this is going to be the height of your door. So however high you want your door. Again, you can make your door tiny like that. You can make it big like that. It's up to you. I'm just going to make it something like that. And then Control R, once again, left click, and then move your mouse, drag it out to right about here so that it's right at the edge of the walkway, even a little bit in, so that's not out right here. And then Control R, once again, left click and drag and put it there as well. So now you can see that we very easily added some faces to this object. Now, another thing I want to go over. I know I'm going over like a million things in this tutorial. Your brain is probably exploding by now. And if it is, awesome. But this is critically important because I know a lot of people do this. I did this when I was a beginner. For the most part, when you model things, what we're doing right now is modeling whenever we edit things in edit mode. When you model things, you want to keep your objects in edit mode. You want everything to be squares for the most part. You could even see that our robot, even though it's a spherical robot, you can see that everything is made up of squares. So it's basically a face with 4 vertices. Now, in future tutorials, in more advanced stuff, you'll probably have faces with 5 vertices to them. Very rarely, you'll have them with 6, and even more rare, you'll have them with more than 5 or 6. Like I said, 98% of the time, everything is going to be made up of 4 faces. 4 vertices per face. And then right here, you can see at the top, because these are triangles, we have 3 faces, or 3 vertices here. But that's an exception because it's sphere. But again, even for humans, for a human face, in future tutorials, when we do that, you'll see that even the human face is made up of 4 verticed faces, and it makes a human face, surprisingly enough. So what you don't want to do is I'm just going to do this. Again, you don't have to follow along because I'm just doing this. You don't necessarily want to do things like this. Unless you know what you're doing, of course. Once you get the hang of it, you could do what you want. But you can see that right here. This face right here has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 vertices. And that could cause a lot of issues. Usually with shapes that are solids, like, you know, chairs, desks, tables, cars, things like that. It doesn't matter as much as long as you know what you're doing. But things that will deform, like a human face, a body, an arm, a cat, a dog, things like this. This is going to cause a lot of trouble because it has 5 vertices. So again, we'll go more into that later. But for the most part, in the beginning, as you're starting off, make sure that everything that you're modeling has only 4 vertices. And then, of course, with the spherical, it will have 3 vertices at the top. So, now that we're off of that, but I want to address that because it's important. Sometimes I see people modeling stuff and there's like a million different vertices, and it keeps it simple, and you'll thank me later, all right, that I start you off. I want to start you guys off right, on the right foot, not like fix it later down the road. All right, now we're going to delete this face to create the door. So Control Tab, go into face select mode. Right click X and delete faces, and bada boom, bada bing, we have a face. I'm going to select this walkway in object mode. So again, tab to go in and out of object mode. I'm going to add 2 more to that to make it go inwards a bit. Cool, so now we have the doorway. Cool. Very last 2 things we're going to model, and then we'll be done with this very long tutorial and the dog barking in this tutorial. And that is going to be the simple doorway and then the pillars, and then we'll be done for this tutorial. But hopefully, I hope you guys are learning a bunch of things here. I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but pretty much everything I went over this tutorial is all like 95% of what it takes to model. Once you know all that I've taught you in this tutorial, you could model anything pretty much because it's basically the same exact procedures. Hold on 1 second. Alright, I'm so sorry for the dog barking in this tutorial, but I'm keeping it real, and also, yeah, I'm not re-recording the 40 minutes or however long this thing is. All right, so now for the door is going to be super simple. We're going to hit Shift-A, add a mesh cube, and there's our door for the most part. Bring it up a bit. S and Z, we're going to scale it up to about there, and then bring it out by left click and dragging on the Y axis. And then bring it out to the X axis. Cool. And then SX to scale that up. You want like half of the doorway right there. And then go ahead and hit Shift-X and bring the other half there as well. Again, Shift-D duplicates or copies your object. And you could shift right click both of them and align them how you want. And you can see that they're sticking out a bit. Even with both of them selected, you could hit SX to scale both of them down as well. And there we go. Cool. So there's our doors. Quick little thing. I know I'm getting off track, but the way I made the doors in the tutorial, I just hit 1 on the numpad to go into front view, tab to go into edit mode. Selecting the face, you could then hit E to extrude, and then right click to leave it in the center, and then S to scale, and that will scale it in. And then what you could do is just kind of like, bring them out or something, give them a little bit of depth, like so. And you could do however you want, you could hit Control R, add in a loop cut here, and then add in another loop cut. And then Control Tab, go into face select mode, Alt right click this edge loop, and then E to extrude, and then right click, and then S to scale, and bring it in. And again, you don't want it to be overlapping in between the faces, so then you would bring it back a little bit. So that's not like, right now you can see it's overlapping a little bit in there, so bring it back a little bit. And there, you could do something like that, or leave it simple as you want. Go crazy. Use what you learned so far in the tutorial to make some cool looking doors. For me, I'm just going to delete that one, Shift-D, copy this one, and just leave them like this. They kind of look like Hershey Kisses, or not Hershey Kisses, Hershey chocolate bars. Cool. All right, the last part, we're going to do the pillars. As far as the tubes that you see in the picture, you can check out my other tutorial, which goes over how to make those tubes. I'm not going to cover that in this tutorial, otherwise we'll be here all day. And I don't want that for you. Not for me. I could do this all day. I don't care. I love this. I love this. All right. For the pillars, we're going to left click here to bring our cursor here. Shift-A, add mesh cube. We're going to bring this up a little bit. And again, if you're, for example, if I zoom in here, it's a little weird. Like when I tumble around this, it's kind of moving very fast and it's hard for me to get precision on this. And that is because once you move around the 3D scene, your center of gravity, I should say, or your center of pivot is a little strange. So what you could do is hit the delete key on the numpad, the delete or period key on the numpad, and that will recenter your focus or your center of gravity or your center or whatever. So that now when you tumble around, it's a lot easier. Cool. So you could do that with any object. If you select this, you hit the delete or period key, it will recenter that, etc., etc. All right, grab this, bring this along, Jeezy. I know this is a long tutorial. I usually don't like long tutorials, but hopefully you're getting a lot out of it. So for the pillars, I did a kind of interesting thing, actually. I never really done this before. However, I tried on a cube the other day, and I thought it looked pretty cool, and that's why I included it in this scene. So the way I did that is basically hitting tab. If you hit W, we have a lot of different tools that we could use. Again, we checked out the subdivide. And subdivide you could definitely use, but again, keep in mind you want to subdivide it properly. Right now we subdivide the whole cube, which is fine because every face has 4 vertices. However, if I subdivide just this, you can see that now these faces have 5 vertices, which is not good. So if you're going to be using the subdivision, for now, just subdivide the whole entire mesh, because that will, for the most part, not really mess you up. Unless it's on triangles, which is another thing. So you wouldn't, again, you wouldn't subdivide the robot we just made because it would mess up the triangles at the top of the head. So, side note. Subdivision is really good for breaking things into 4s. Like if you want to break it into 4s like this. Anyways, so hit W. And right now what we're going to do is we are going to hit bevel. So bevel, if we hit bevel, nothing happens, but don't click anything. As soon as you hit bevel, just move your mouse out and it will bevel your object. Cool. Now again, and bring it to how you want. I'm going to do it about like this. Now again, you said, Alex, no triangles. Well, again, you have to know what you're doing and you have to, again, know what you're doing. Here, triangle is fine. But, yeah. So now, what we're going to do with this still selected, once we've done the bevel, we're going to hit E to extrude. Once again, don't move your mouse. Just right-click to leave it in the center. And it's still extruded. So keep in mind, if you do an extrusion and you leave it in the center, that's going to be bad. Because right now, we still have these faces overlapping. So once you hit the right-click to leave it in the center, just hit the S key and scale it in a bit. Like so. And there we go. We got the pillars from the tutorial. All you gotta do now is go to Add Modifier, Array, change it from the X-axis, so select that and hit 0, and go to the Z-axis and put 1, and then bump this up to however many you want. Let's go with 5. 5 is good. Let's move this over here. I'm gonna hit S to scale it down a little bit because it's taking too much space on the platform. Bring it down. And then all I'm going to do is hit Shift D, Y. Bring it out like this. And in fact, I'm going to show you 2 ways that you could do this. So you could hit Shift D and Y, and once again, move it like that. Nothing wrong with that at all. I'm going to hit Shift D and X and bring this one over here. What you could also do, of course, is go over here, add a modifier, add another array modifier, and move it, change it from 1 on the X-axis, put 0 there, and put, I'm going to left-click and drag on the Y-axis. And that way, we could just have it very simply like this. Whoa, put count 16. That's not what I want to do. I want to do this. There we go. That way, you can see on these ones right here that we've duplicated, they're all individual objects. And if we edit this one right here, the other ones don't change. However, this one is one single object, and if we edit this one, all of them change. So again, it depends what you're doing. If you're in a scene where your pillars look slightly different, excuse me, then you would obviously not do this because you can't make them different. These are exact duplicates. So I'm just going to leave it like this. I'm going to put half of them on an array, half of them individual objects, just to show you what you could do within Blender. So there you have it. Congratulations, ladies and gentlemen, or should I say Blender Maniacs? Because I don't know who's watching this on the other side. Last thing you need to do, and this is critically important, we should have probably done some of this along the way, is to save your file. Don't you hate it when stuff crashes? Yeah, I do too. So go to File, Save As, and let me see. Go to wherever you want to save it. So let me just find my place here. I'm going to create a new folder within this. So if I hit the little folder icon here, we'll create a new folder. Put for modeling. And then what you want to do, just name this something like Robot 1. Because what you're going to do is you're not going to want to save your file over the same file every single time. Because if you mess up your file, then you can't go back. So you're going to save For example, we're going to save this one, save as Blender file. We're going to save it as robot1. Later on, when we get further in the tutorial, we're going to do file. We're going to do save as, not save. We're going to do save as, and we're going to save it as robot2. I'm going to put cancel for now. Because that way you have multiple different files along your project. That way if robot 1, 2, 3, or 4 gets corrupt or something, you still have robot files 5, 6, 7, 8, or whatever that you could go back on. You want to make sure to do that. Don't ever only have one file if it's a big project. If it's something simple like a cube, go ahead and do that. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on modeling. Man, that was a long one. I am so sorry. I'm not sorry. I know you enjoyed it. Hopefully you learned. And with that, that is modeling within Blender. In the next tutorial, we will either take a look at texturing, materials, or lighting. One of those. So I'll see you in the next tutorial. Once again, thumbs up. There's the last dog bark. I promise you. Please leave a comment. Join the community. Hope to see you guys around. Once again, this is Alex Cordobar with BlenderMania3D.com. Love you guys. I'm out for now. See you in the next tutorial. Ciao for now. Au revoir.